Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the House Committee on Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs. We will be meeting in executive session this morning on 4 bills, as indicated in the calendar. But before we get to those, I'd ask you to please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We're going to go out of order a little bit and at least have begin the discussion on SB 134FN. Director Henry Lippman, the director of the state Medicaid program, is here, and we're competing with his time this morning between us and the governor and council. So we don't want to disrupt other bodies. So Director Lippman, if you want to come up and offer your input. Thank you.
Good morning again. For the record, Henry Lippman, the state's Medicaid director. I appreciated working with the chair of the subcommittee and the committee itself in terms of working on an amendment to Senate Bill 134. I think the key things that I wanted to raise as the Medicaid director, one that are incorporated in the committee's work. One is that we have the option to do the work requirements under a state plan amendment. It will save the state a lot of money in terms of an 1115 waiver approach, which was the only approach before the passage of OB3. The state plan approach is very important for us to meet time frames that are in the law and for the budget for the state. The second thing was that the requirements that are in statute as passed and signed into law in July, there's going to be there's a requirement in that law, OB3, to otherwise known as HR1 if you know it that way, or OBBBA. But when I say OB3, I'm referring to any of the ways that it's referred to. There's a requirement for the federal government to issue regulations, but that date is not until June 1st of 2026. There's a requirement to implement by the end of calendar year 26, effectively beginning January 1, 27. The committee considered, I think, our testimony of that it's important to make sure that we can still pursue the state plan amendment, that if federal law or federal regulation differs from the amendment, that we want to stay consistent with the federal requirement, as all the states will have to, so we won't have to go back and do rework. There are a number of different policy options that the committee considered. All of them are within the bounds of what was published in OB3. And so to the extent that there's a regulation that is different than or slightly modifies that I think with the language that's being considered in, I think it's Amendment 3072H, that's appropriate protections there. The one thing that I did subsequent to the committee sort of finishing up its work, there's one policy position which I suggested to the chair, the members of the subcommittee, Representative McDonald and Representative Kofold, that rather than requiring 3 consecutive months prior to gaining eligibility, to move that down to 1. And there are people can get exemptions, but there is a group of people that were concerned about that could be in the 5 to 10% range that will skip by granted advantage and just go to regular Medicaid eligibility. The consequence of doing that is that we move from a 90% federal match with 0 general fund impact, because the 10% share comes from outside of the general fund, that we would move to a 50-50 match. And if it's only at 5% of the people that go in that direction, it could cost us $8 million annually. And if it's up to 10%, it could be $16 million annually. I also was asked when I briefed the governor's office to on where we were on 134. They were very supportive of that direction because we are in a situation where we're going to have to make additional budget cuts. And so to the extent that we can take that pressure off, I think that's a positive thing. I feel like the department's concerns within the body of the law were heard and incorporated, and I appreciate the opportunity to lift up what I'm sharing this morning. I'll take any questions if you have any, if that's appropriate, Chair.
Sure. Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Mr. Lippman, for taking my question. So the amendment that we are going to see now has a 1 month look back rather than a 3 month look back. Is that correct?
That's my understanding is what you'll see.
And then the second question I have is, what about self-attestation?
So self-attestation is not allowed in the amendment, but that also is something that is currently in the statute that gives the state to pick either or. And so I think that since it's within the policy allowed, I think it's a policy decision, and we can work with it.
But
Follow up.
if I may clarify,
Yep.
The last draft that I saw prohibited any self-attestation. Is that correct?
For an exemption, that's true.
Yeah. So that's still that way in the next iteration.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Representative Lamontagne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Lippman. Could you explain, you touched on it briefly when you were talking about whether we go the 50-50 funding, or what was specifically would trigger one or the other?
So I think if the hurdle to obtain eligibility is that you have to meet the work requirement before you maybe even knew you were going to apply for Medicaid 3 consecutive months, that may lead to some people moving to say, okay, I'm not going to go to the Granted Advantage program, I'm going to go to a different program. And there's a group of people that will have exemption, but there's also a group of people that may not, and so they may choose to wait it out a little bit and not be subject to a work requirement, and then the additional cost comes to the state.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Director Lippman.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming this morning, and I know you have a busy schedule.
Appreciate your accommodating me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're waiting on this amendment that is pending, and all is before OLS right now, so we're really not able to proceed with any formal action as a committee on this until, of course, we have the amendment in hand. So it wouldn't be appropriate. So let's go back to our regular schedule and open discussion on HB 392 FN. And I believe Representative Polazov, you have a motion.
I move OTP.
Okay, and Representative Kesselring? Okay, Representative Polazov, you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, I think it's an important bill, and I will be voting in favor of it, and I encourage other committee members to join me. I think it's important for health and human services being delivered to our citizens, not favoring person or group based on politics. So that's the intent of this bill. Is this bill as written is perfect? I don't think it's perfect. There were some developments. Office of Health Equity was renamed into Office of Health Access. And then if there were certain policies based on racist assumptions which were named climate justice, some of those policies are no longer implemented in our government, so that part of the bill might be no longer needed. So I will be, there's a group of legislators who are willing to work with me on floor amendment if some adjustment to this bill is needed. But the underlying message and underlying intention of this bill is crucial for our state, so that's why I ask you to support it.
Thank you. Commissioner Landry, did you want to speak at all on this bill? So is the Associate Commissioner here? Or? Yeah. Would you like to comment? I know we had that discussion the other day, but Attorney Williams, do you have any, either one of you want to add anything before we go further?
Good morning, Chair McDonald, Ann Landry, Associate Commissioner.
And John Williams, the Director of Legislative Affairs for Health and Services. And I want to thank you, Chairman McDonald, and the members of the committee for allowing us to come up to speak briefly on the underlying bill. So I'll start off with Associate Commissioner Landry, and then if I have anything to add, I certainly will.
Thank you for having us here. So in essence, the Office of Health Equity, per legislation, was changed. The name was changed to Office of Health Access on July 1st, which really reflects the intent of the office, which is to break down barriers to access to care for all citizens in the state of New Hampshire. This office really focuses on three main components. Again, it's the communication access, which allows us to be in compliance with federal and state civil rights laws, which enables everyone who may have a language barrier or disability to receive access to our services, whether those are services that DHHS provides directly or through our contracts. So that's whether deaf and hard of hearing, visually impaired, English as a second language, any other disability that would prevent individuals from getting access. The second main part of this office is the Refugee Resettlement Program, which is a bipartisan federal program that is 100% federally funded. Every state but one, due to the size of that state, has a refugee resettlement program. It is all heavily prescribed and dictated by the federal government. Having this office in the state of New Hampshire and then DHHS allows us to have better control and management of the money. The entire purpose of this program is to allow those refugees who are here legally to become self-sufficient by having employment services, health services, social services, allow them to acclimate to the U.S. and be employed, which we have a high success rate, and our refugees are an incredibly important part of our workforce here in New Hampshire and across the country. Again, these are legally residing refugees have been vetted by the federal government. And then the third main component is community engagement, allowing us to really understand what those barriers to care is across the state, whether that's a homebound senior in rural New Hampshire or an individual with disabilities in an urban area or what have you. Again, and this part really ties into our Rural Health Transformation Grant that I'm sure most individuals here have heard about, where we had the opportunity to bring in $100 million per year for the next 5 years, maybe more. And it's all looking at access to care in rural New Hampshire. And so the Office of Health Access plays a critical role in ensuring that these individuals have access to care, whether that's going out and meeting them in communities or meeting with providers. So again, really critical. There is, and I'll just stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Representative Weber.
Thank you once again, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here and thank you for taking our questions. My question would be, if we are to vote yes on an ought to pass on this bill as it is, which references the names of certain departments that simply don't exist anymore because we've changed them. Do you have an opinion as to whether what is passed is actually going to have an effect or not?
Sure. So I can only speak to the language around the Office of Health Equity, which is what resides in DHHS, which is now the Office of Health Access. And all of those components would continue in some form or another. In this office, we have strong leadership and connection to the senior leadership, to myself and Commissioner Weaver, and it's a cohesive group, and they support one another. But all of the functions have to remain for us to be successful at DHHS, either because we're federally required or required by state law, or it's really an important part of our engagement with the rural communities and actually all communities across the state.
Thank you very much.
Representative Palazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming here with this information. Could you speak a little bit about contractual part and like what kind of waiting and instruction on your part is involved, especially as would this bill affect those contractors and the way they're being sometimes impartial in terms of, for example, DEI policies?
And Chairman McDonald, so in response to the representative's question, in addition to the House bill, the trailer bill HB2, changing the name from Health Equity to Health Access, which is a direction that, working with your committee, we were already intending to head in that direction, because it was actually a much better name in terms of what it actually functions and does in terms of people gaining access. As it relates to contract in HB2, in addition to the name change, which was articulated both by the House and Senate and signed by the governor, there was a provision not just for HHS, but all state agencies, to review all of our contracts to see whether or not any of the provisions of those contracts touched upon diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so all the state agencies were required by October 1st to submit those contracts. The Department of Health and Services did honor and fulfill the requirements under HB2 and provided the contracts that were identified. Out of the thousands of contracts we had, there was a handful plus that were actually identified. And it's a matter of public record. You can go to Admin Services and seek a copy of that. And so we are very thoughtfully and meaningfully working through those issues, and I would suggest that the provisions in HB2 were actually intended to address the concerns that you're raising. What you have in front of you with the bill in and of itself does not touch upon contracts, which was touched upon in HB2. In addition to that, there are other sections of the bill that did not even involve the department. Section 1, you may recall that the governor herself actually eliminated the entity that you'll see in Section 1, so that's been taken care of in terms of legislation. Our pieces involve Sections 2 and Sections 4 and 5 of the legislation. There is also provision that dealt with the Department of Environmental Services, and you can see from the fiscal analysis that there was an impact to them. I do know that the Deputy Commissioner, Adam Crapo, is certainly very interested in following to seeing where this goes, and our suggestion would be that the issues and problems that you heard, not only from the state agencies, but by the individuals who came before this committee, we were at the House Finance Committee room, a bigger room that day, in terms of the implications that it would have relative to those contracts for access to health, haven't been addressed or changed in the current product in front of you. And so we don't have the benefit of a potential floor amendment to see if it would be curative or not. So as it stands, we would just respectfully say that at the present time, nothing has really changed since those public hearings that were held back in, I believe, March of this past year. So I hope that's helpful, and I certainly can address any questions, but I also ask Associate Commissioner Anlander if she had anything else she would like to add.
No, I think that's okay. That's good.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. So, with respect to the DES, I believe that was with regard to Title VI. Is that correct? And impacts there. I know you said you can't exactly speak to that. However, is that part of an impact to the Office of Refugee Resettlement and Education, or what components are in here that could potentially impact? I mean, $80 to $90 million is quite a large sum of money. Is there someone from the department that can speak to that other than yourselves or anybody else?
Is there anyone here? You're talking about environmental services. Yeah. Is there anyone here from that department? Seeing no one, I did exchange an email with Deputy Commissioner Crapo that I'm happy to share because I asked him his opinion, and as a follow-up, Attorney Williams, he mentions that they very rarely, and to his recollection, have not received very many civil rights complaints, but federal law requires them to deal with those, and the bill as written would not allow them to do that. And I'll just quote the next paragraph. If I understood correctly, the intent was to remove DEI and social justice type programming from the state agencies mentioned. That is the case. I can confidently say we do not have anything like that at NHDES. We no longer work on, quote, environmental justice, unquote, as that has been eliminated as a priority at the federal level. We have removed it from all of our negotiated priorities and commitments with EPA as well as our website. I don't know if that answers your question, Representative.
In part, but not entirely. Thank you.
That's all I have, I'm afraid. Anyone else? Representative Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Just as a technical issue, it says in Section 1, the governor hereby dissolve the council and is prohibited from reestablishing this council. Is it, I know legislators can't say that you can't legislate something in another session. Is this a moot point as well, that this would not be able to stand scrutiny?
The council, the Governor's Council for Diversity and Inclusion was sunsetted at the end of former Governor Sununu's term. So Attorney Williams might be able to speak to whether it's ever allowed to come back, but it no longer exists. So it was mute when we first testified in February or March of last year.
Just, if I may, curious if this would prohibit anybody from establishing such council again.
This is a very Chairman McDonald. Sure. This is a very interesting question that is being raised. Again, we're here specifically on sections 2 and the remaining sections, and I would absolutely echo what Associate Commissioner Ann Landry said, which is it's moot because the governor, current governor, Governor Kelly Ayotte, allowed that to be sunsetted. There has always been freedom of the executive branch for the governor's office to reestablish whatever they would like to, and we've seen such entities that were sunsetted and brought back forth. And sometimes it's based upon a need, addressing a need more nimbly and more effectively. I can't speak on behalf of the governor's office, but I've not, at least myself personally, seen legislation that would tell the governor from being able to establish a particular entity if it was needed.
Anyone else? Representative Kesselring.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a quick question for you on this bill. If it moved forward, would the departments that are federally mandated be dissolved or put into another department in HHS?
Thank you for your question. If this were to move forward, we would have to, yes, find a new home for these components for everything that's in the Office of Health Access. The work would have to continue by federal and state law.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for taking my question. I'm substituting on this committee, so I don't have the history of the hearings and whatever, but is this bill really needed? I guess from listening to you, I'm trying to figure out why we need this bill if most of these things have already been done.
Chairman McDonald, addressing Representative Lane's question, you may recall there were only a very small amount of bills. We are here, you direct our policy, but this is one working along collaboratively, engaging the governor's office that we actually actively opposed on. So we are not in favor of the underlying bill. And it has not changed, so I would say that we still oppose the underlying bill.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's just so I heard you correctly in your statement regarding lines 4 through 7 of the original bill on page 2. You have a concern about a separation of powers issue potentially there in directing the executive branch in a prohibitive way. Is that what you're saying? Either to the positive or the negative?
Chairman McDonald, if we could just ask which of the two speakers that is being referred to.
Oh, either one of you within the department. You were talking about whether or not a piece of legislation could direct the governor's office to reestablish or prohibit a reestablishment of something.
And Chairman McDonald, just for clarification, we're actually talking about section 1 of the bill, which runs through lines 1 through lines 3, and that is exactly what Representative Woods had requested. I didn't have anything more to add to it. It's not a section that involved directly the department. It involves the governor's office, and so our sections are sections 2, 4, and 5 of the bill.
Great, thank you.
And I should be clear, we were taking a position only on those sections.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, does anyone else have any discussion on the bill before I ask the clerk to call the roll? Representative McLean.
Yeah, so I'm gonna vote to support the bill. I do think it's problematic, and I think, as it is, it's full of holes, but I'm going, out of respect to Representative Polozov, give him the opportunity to have a little bit of run room to see what he can do with it. If it comes back to the floor in the state, I'll be voting against it.
And, yes, Representative Weber.
My apologies for the phone. I should have turned it off, and I'm very mortified. It makes no sense to me to vote yes on a bill that we all agree is fundamentally flawed. I would prefer an ITL motion. I will vote against the ought to pass motion. If somebody thinks they can fix the bill between now and the time we meet, the remedy would be to vote ITL on this bill, on the bill as it stands, but bring an amendment that could be considered on the floor. But given that all of these functions are necessary functions, at least as far as the Department of Health and Human Services go, I will be voting ITL on everything because the functions need to go forward. And the bill makes no sense given the changes that were already made in House Bill 2. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Representative Woods.
Just an observation. Much of the work that we do is really a soft form of DEI. And I just served on a committee to look at palliative and hospice care and how that segment of our society is not well cared for. I'm also on the commission for the deaf and hard of hearing and how we can better serve them. And in that sense, we're looking at a segment of our society that needs attention. And many other examples come to mind. We don't call it DEI, but in fact, we are trying to make delivery of our healthcare system equitable, and in that sense, could be contorted to fall under this. I would certainly hope not, but just an observation that in many ways we are really doing what we're trying to, in a sense, trying to get rid of, but also addressing it in the sense of the new title being accessibility, which I think is the term we want.
Thank you. Representative Mazur.
Yes, thank you. Respectfully, what you just mentioned is not DEI. it's health access that was mentioned before. So DEI is a whole different realm of something we're trying to address. Thank you.
Representative Tejas?
Respectfully, I would say that last statement was incorrect, and I appreciate the examples you provided, as well as all the ones that we heard. To refresh all of our memory, we had 2 hours of testimony back in January or whenever we heard the bill. We only had one person in favor. That was the prime sponsor. We heard many, many, many different examples illustrating, helping us understand what it actually means, and I appreciate the reminder of core functions that in fact are also required. I'll also remind us that if you look online, there were 2,852 people who weighed in, 1%. That's, proportionately only one part of 100 were, or 30 in support, were in favor.
Any last thoughts? Representative Lamontagne?
Yes, I have a question, and I'm sorry, Representative Pelosi, but if I didn't understand that you're not submitting this amendment now, that wasn't clear to me why it was just passed out if we're not going to vote on it.
He is not, but Representative, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But I'll just finish with one other comment, that I'm fundamentally opposed to this, the whole concept that we have to eliminate anything to do with DEI, because what we're offering instead is we'll go back to uniformity, inequity, and exclusion. And the health department is working to try to provide access for people who would otherwise be excluded. Thank you.
Representative Palazzo, did you want to address why you're not introducing the amendment?
Yeah. The intention was specifically to affirm the right for access for different kind of disability access, and the specific language didn't came out correct from OLS, but I'm even more supportive of underlying bill, because you've just heard that current language of this bill will allow to all required federally mandated services to continue. So there's no problem with that. And the same with renaming office, like this bill was filed that Office of Health Equity had one name, now it has different name, but legislative intent would be determined by legislature, not by renaming or office. Thank you.
Okay. Final comments. I will be voting against this motion of ought to pass. It's a difficult decision, but in accordance with other sentiments that have been expressed, and I'm happy to consider any floor amendments that might surface between now and January when we take this up. But in the meantime, I will be voting against ought to pass, because I don't believe this bill accomplishes what it intends, as well intentioned as it is. And with that, Mr. Clerk, I'd ask you to call the roll.
Rep. Mazer?
Yes.
Rep. McLean?
Yes.
Rep. DeLamus?
Yes.
Rep. Kofalt?
Yes.
Rep. Polozov?
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Rep. DeSimone?
Yes.
Rep. McGrath?
Yes.
Rep. Kesselring?
Yes.
Rep. Weber?
No.
Rep. Lane?
No.
Rep. Woods?
No.
Rep. Schultz?
No.
Rep. Tejas?
No.
Rep. Lamontagne?
No.
Rep. Hartnett? Rep. Murray?
No.
And Rep. McDonald?
No.
Vote is 9-8. Motion passes.
Okay. All right. Next up is HB 621 FN.
If I may,
sorry,
Mr. Chair,
Representative.
there will be a minority report.
Okay.
We don't need to get those to you today, do we?
No.
But certainly by the end of the week.
Right, that'd be great, because the deadline is the end of next week, so the 21st.
No, we'll have it by the end of this week.
That'd be great. Thank you, Representative Weber.
Put it down for me and we'll discuss.
And Representative Polazov, you'll be doing the majority report? Right, and again, if you could get it to me by the weekend, that would be great. Okay, next up is HB 621 FN. And, 621 FN. And I will move ITL on that.
Second.
Representative Drew seconds.
I'm
brief-
sorry, the motion was,
ITL on HB 621. As a number of people who might be here from the department know, I was in the, I worked on program integrity for a long time in the fraud unit at Health and Human Services. I know the value of the information in the birth worksheet. Privacy issues are already addressed in other statutes, state statutes. The information provided is important in terms of determining citizenship, birth defects, health needs, and a host of other issues. And every state in the nation currently provides this information. There was a subcommittee on this bill. I had the privilege of chairing it, and Representative Lamontagne served on it. She did an excellent job taking notes, and thank you again for those minutes. Representative Jay Markell was also on the subcommittee. He couldn't be with us. He's traveling, but we heard from the department extensively, and for these reasons and many others, I am opposed to the bill and moving ITL. Any other comments? Okay. Representative Lamontagne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I will also say that we heard a lot of testimony that the loss of the information by allowing women to opt out would really harm a lot of our public health programs. And I thought the testimony for that was overwhelming. And that the Senate version of this bill, which wasn't quite the same, but that did pass, and that included more privacy protections within it. So that's why I also agree with the ITL motion.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? I'm seeing none. With that, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll. The motion is ITL, an expedient to legislate on House Bill 621.
Rep. Mazer?
Yes.
Rep. McLean?
Yes.
Rep. DeLamus?
Yes.
Rep. Kofalt?
Yes.
Rep. Polozov? Clerk votes yes. Rep. DeSimone?
Yes.
Rep. McGrath?
Yes.
Rep. Kesselring?
Yes.
Rep. Weber?
Yes.
Rep. Lane?
Yes.
Rep. Woods?
Yes.
Rep. Schultz?
Yes.
Rep. Tejas?
Yes.
Rep. Lamontagne?
Yes.
Rep. Murray?
Yes.
Vote is 17-0. Motion passes.
If I may vote.
Oh, sorry. Rep. McDonald?
Yes.
Sorry.
Every clerk
Happens
does it.
every time.
Okay, the
Vote,
motion.
vote is 17-0. Motion passes.
Okay. Representative Weber moves consent. Is there any objection? Okay, that will go on the consent calendar.
Who's doing the reports?
I will do the report. There'll only be one report.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is SB 36, Representative Kesselring. I believe you have an amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment's being passed out now. Sorry for the delay, but the amendment specifically changes two things. It changes the date to July 1st, which was decided on or discussed in Committee of Conference that was not put in there. But also through the Committee of Conference and conversations and all the time, there's one change that we'd like to put forward, which is removing estimated from the gestational age. No other state has this in their statute. No other municipality that we could find had it. And we're removing it to not make the precedent that New Hampshire be the first.
Okay, and there's also, did you address the date change?
Yes, I started with that. July
Okay,
1st would
I'm
be
sorry.
the date change.
Sorry. Okay, so you were moving on to pass, I assume?
Yes, I'm moving on to pass.
Is there a
As
second?
amended.
Representative Delama seconds. Is there any other discussion? Representative Weber.
Yes, I'm very disappointed that this is all in one amendment, because I would very much like to vote for the change in the effective date. And I would have gotten an amendment that said that, but we were under the impression that it was going to be two separate amendments, and I have not seen the contents of this amendment until now. So I am reluctant. I'm sorry that I don't have the opportunity to vote for that, because I think that's necessary. The removing estimated gestational age when the abortion was performed is an absolute non-starter as far as I'm concerned. The problems with that, and I think that saying that no other state does this, if you look at Massachusetts, they talk about ranges. And our statutes already require that providers who provide anything beyond 24 months, which is 24 weeks, I'm sorry, which is our prohibition, due to a medical emergency, have to file a very detailed written report on the reasons for that emergency treatment. So I am concerned because this is the same issue that was voted down in the Senate, and it leads us towards more ultrasounds and more intrusion and more unnecessary and expensive procedures and intrusions on women's privacy. So I will be voting no.
Again, Representative Weber, I apologize. There was originally.
I do understand that, but I
sure. Any other discussion? Representative Palazzo.
I would like, I have a question to Representative Kesselring, or if anyone else can provide me information regarding that concern that this amendment will cause more expensive and potentially harmful ultrasound interventions.
Representative Kesselring.
I'll try to take that. So the language in the bill, as Representative Weber pointed out, if you look at the underlying line item in Massachusetts law, it does specifically state that gestational age and does not have estimated. It does, however, have broken down provisions of that, including other states where we don't have. So with that being said, right now, the intrusion would be more too, because they're going to need to do the same thing to estimate that gestational age. So the argument would go both ways, I guess, because we don't have that chart like other states do. So that was the main crux of the reason to remove estimated, so that doctors actually do what the doctors do and continue it the same way they would, without giving the ability for the reporting to be different, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions? Thoughts? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll. We are voting on the amendment, which is 3091H, offered by Representative Kesselring, and the motion is ought to pass.
Rep. Mazer.
Yes.
Rep. McLean.
Yes.
Rep. Delamus.
Yes.
Rep. Kofalt.
Yes.
Rep. Polozov.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Rep. DeSimone.
Yes.
Rep. McGrath.
Yes.
Rep. Kesselring.
Yes.
Rep. Weber.
no.
Rep. Lane.
No.
Rep. Woods.
No.
Rep. Schultz.
No.
Rep. Tejas.
No.
Rep. LaMontagne.
No.
Rep. Hart. No. Rep. Murray.
No.
And
Rep. McDonald.
yes.
Vote is 10-7. Motion passes.
Okay. Representative Kesselring, do you have another motion? Ought to pass as amended, perhaps.
Sorry. Yes, ought to pass as amended. I apologize.
Representative Delamus seconds. Is there any discussion on this motion, or do either of you wish to speak to your motions? Seeing none, when the clerk is ready, we'll proceed to the roll.
Rep. Mazer,
Yes.
Rep. McLean,
Yes.
Rep. DeLamus,
Yes.
Rep. Kofalt,
Yes.
Rep. Polizov. Clerk votes yes. Rep. DeSimone,
Yes.
Rep. McGrath,
Yes.
Rep. Kesselring,
Yes.
Rep. Weber,
No.
Rep. Lane,
No.
Rep. Woods,
No.
Rep. Schultz,
No.
Rep. Tejas,
No.
Rep. LaMontagne,
No.
Rep. Murray,
No.
and Rep. McDonald.
Yes.
Vote is 10-7. Motion passes.
Okay. Representative Kesselring, you'll do the majority report on that. And do we know who's doing the minor? I assume there'll be a minority report.
There will be. I don't know who's doing it yet.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and finally, SB 134FN is our last bill to be considered this morning. Representative McLean, you are chairman of the subcommittee, and before we get into it, I want to thank the subcommittee for its service. It was clearly the most challenging bill that we retained, obviously in a very important one, controversial one, but I know that they had multiple meetings, and thank you, all of you who served on the subcommittee, for your work. Representative McLean.
So yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So SB 134 basically introduces work requirements to the Medicaid Advantage program. The committee as a whole retained the bill because we had a complicated rollout in 2019 that hadn't gone really well, and also we knew that there was potential federal legislation waiting on the horizon. So we wanted to have a better understanding of what that was, and so we retained the bill. Through the course of the summer, the federal legislation did come into being, and so I know that many members of this committee are fundamentally opposed, to the concept of work requirements, and they're thinking, that's not really the best way to go after fraud, and I respect that. But the passage of the federal legislation really made that academic. So the purpose of the subcommittee was to craft legislation that would preserve the integrity of the program and also be in compliance with the federal law, so that we would not be jeopardizing the funding. And as Director Littman, I don't want to repeat too much of what he said. But the initial legislation as it came to us was in the form of a 115 waiver. It was made clear to us that the federal government is prioritizing not waivers, but people who are introducing plans. So basically, the legislation pivots to direct HHS to develop a plan to submit to CMS. And that allows us to go to the front of the line, and Director Littman was very clear from his conversations with his counterparts at the federal level that extensions would be very hard in coming. So the fact that we're able to get in line early with a plan that they can go through and just basically helps ensure that we don't have any gaps in coverage. The other thing that we talked about a little bit during the public hearing back earlier in the year was what is the nature of the exemptions, and we really wanted to make sure that the exemptions that we put forward were aligned with the federal law. So there might be a temptation to put in a lot of little exemptions here and there, but every time we do that, that means now we have to be getting a waiver. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were tying the exemptions to the federal law. And the other aspect of that is, as the federal legislation potentially changes, we did not want to be in a place where now that is in conflict with our state law, which would also lead to gaps in coverage. So basically, what we did is we went through in the work sessions to try to align those as best we can. We had an amendment which Representative Kofalt is going to offer that has the approval of the The prime sponsor obviously worked on it in close conjunction with the department and had the approval of the governor's office as well. So we think, we have, from a legislative perspective, we're in a pretty good place. Obviously, the fear is, what about, getting the word out and getting people properly signed up? Director Lippman is already on that. The subcommittee heard testimony that they are rolling out an app and other things to try to address that as best we can. So, Mr. Chair, that's basically where we're at. I would just turn it over to Representative Kofalt to go over the details of his amendment.
Representative Kofalt.
Thank you. So I'm going to be passing out an amendment. I am still waiting on 2 minor changes. So I would ask for those of you who already have the amendment to, because those of you, nope, you just need 2.
Some of us have no amendments.
Sue
So.
and Steve, you don't need a copy, you have one. And I will pass this your way. So I guess I just wanted to sort of frame some of what was initially proposed by the Senate sponsors, the department, and the governor's office working together on required changes. And so as Representative McLean pointed out, there are fundamentally we need to change from a waiver to implementing the program. In other words, we are no longer asking for an exception from the federal program, we are implementing the federal program. So that is a fundamental requirement that starts on page 2, line 23. And then I will circle back to the preceding text in a moment. But what this section does essentially is to say we're not applying for a waiver anymore, now we're implementing the program. It also suspends the existing section of statute in which New Hampshire passed a work requirement previously. Why does it suspend that? Because we are essentially saying that the federal work requirement or community engagement requirement, as it's also called, will supersede that which we have passed into statute at the state level, but not implemented. There's a provision also that if for some reason federal law were to change, we would revert to what is currently in state statute. So that is really page 2, line 23 onward. The first section, lines 3 through page 2, line 22, or line 20, 18, establishes some additional provisions. So under federal statute, there are some differences between what New Hampshire has previously passed and what the federal statute requires. So, for example, the existing state statute specifies 100 hours a month. The federal law says 80 hours a month. So the goal here is to not is that we don't want to divert, or we don't want to differ too much from what's being done at the federal level. So we essentially want to follow the federal program. Within that, there are some parameters, and states are given latitude to decide some of the details of how they want to implement the work requirements. So, for example, there is a between 1 and 3 months look back period. And the look back period is what Mr. Lippman was discussing previously. It says we're going to determine that the person who is applying for Medicaid under this program, under Granted Advantage, it has fulfilled the work requirements for during that look back period. So in the amendment before you, that says 3 consecutive months prior. And for reasons outlined by Director Lippman, it makes more sense for the state of New Hampshire to not use a 3-month look-back period, but to go with a 1-month look-back period instead. Other provisions that are included throughout this are saying, among other things, that we don't want to accept self-attestation. So self-attestation is essentially someone saying, yes, I was working, I don't have proof, but I'm going to say that I was. So the department uses ex parte sources of information to verify work. Employment is not the only requirement. You can be attending school, you can be going through a job training program, you can be doing volunteer work, but in all of these cases, it is reasonable to require that people either provide documentary evidence or that documentary evidence be accessed from third-party sources. So my intention here is to make sure that we put guardrails around this program to maximize program integrity. And I think that program integrity ensures that we have a fiscally sound program that is available to the people who truly need it, and not to, not to those who are potentially gaming the system. So the other, so I guess the other change, there's one other minor change. So the one change that I mentioned already in the next version of this that we'll see is page 1, line 13. Instead of saying 3 consecutive months, it will say 1 month. So for the 1 month immediately preceding the month in which the individual applies. The other change is a correction to the reference on lines 7 and 8 of page 1, which references the federal code definition of an applicable individual. And that apparently was incorrect. It should be 1396A9, A1, 8. So, so those are the two changes. Other than that, this would remain exactly the same. I apologize that we are still waiting for the amendment. I see that the committee assistant just left the room, and I suspect that may be to get copies, I hope. The holiday yesterday led to a period in which that and an oversight on my part on process led to a delay.
In fact, OLS has got 1,400 bills that's sifting through.
Yeah, so I see that there is now an amendment, so I think she is taking that to get it printed. So yeah, so I apparently sent that request via email and should have done it through the portal. So it's certainly I am at least partly at fault there. So
Representative Kesselring. Oh, okay. Excellent. Oh, excellent. Okay. Any discussion in the meantime? Obviously, it's hard to discuss something we don't physically have yet. Representative Weber?
Well, I'll leap in because it's very clear what the changes are, and they are tied to specific places in here. I'm a little conflicted because on the one hand, this does make things marginally better than they were in our existing statute, which is usually my cue to say, okay, I'll take that because it's better than it was. I am glad that you have reconsidered the 3 months and consider going to 1 month. I think that the self-attestation is unfortunate. And here's my problem with the whole thing. In our zeal, and as Representative Hartnett, who is ill today and couldn't be here, told us at the subcommittee, yes, there is misuse of the system, but it's very small. And what this whole overriding scheme is going to do is it is going to have the effect of prohibiting many people who desperately need this support and who qualify for it, who are not able to work their way through the process of attestation and getting the right kind of documentation. And those people are not going to get the health care that they need because we are trying to bar a small section of people from taking advantage. And I think that's the wrong balance. And I'm thinking particularly of elderly folks for whom the idea of, oh, you can just do it through an app is completely useless, because they probably don't understand any function of a smartphone other than the phone. And they probably don't understand how to upload things and download things and install an app and figure out how to set up their parameters and their passwords and everything else. And I speak as somebody who lived through the last 3 years with my sister, who was descending into dementia, calling up all the family members and saying, Microsoft has changed my passwords again, which meant that she couldn't find her passwords. So I just think that what we ought to be doing as a society is giving people health care so that they can work, rather than requiring people to work first and get health care second. And so I will be voting no on the amendment and on the bill.
Thank you. Anyone else? Representative Lamontagne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some comments and also a question, because I haven't had time to read this really carefully. When someone gets an exemption, how often are they going to have to prove that they qualify for an exemption? But overall, I think we've made both at the federal level and this bill will make a program that's already really expensive to administer now much more expensive to administer. It's sort of the opposite of trying to have a more efficient government. And my stepdaughter is on Medicaid. She has Down syndrome, so she fits under this qualification for exemption. Nonetheless, she already works 80 hours a week because it gives her joy to do that. But she could not possibly fill out any of the forms, anything that's required to get her on Medicaid. But because she has Down syndrome, she has a lot of support. But I know that there are many people out there who may just be a little higher functioning than my stepdaughter, who are virtually on their own trying to make it, to get health insurance, to keep a job, to pay rent. And this is going to end up hurting them, not helping them. But I would like some clarification about how often people will have to prove that they're exempt. It's not really clear to me.
Thank you for the question. So I'm not clear on that answer, because this primarily addresses the work requirements and verification of compliance. I believe it would be every 3 months, because we are specifying in here at least quarterly. It's part of this bill. That's another area where states have latitude as to how often they can verify compliance. So my understanding is that would be compliance or exemption would be every 3 months, but I can't say that I am 100% sure of that. I'm about 95%.
Is that a Director
sure
Lippman question, or does anyone? Okay, it is. All right. Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I love subbing, and I appreciate being here with you. And I love, being quiet and doing my job as a sub. But it's hard for me to hear talking about people that are in poverty who do work and having more pressure on them and the stigmas around that, instead of valuing work well enough that people don't make such low wages that they have to go on Medicaid. Everything about that philosophy is upside down and immoral, so I'm sorry that I could not hold my tongue. but this is backwards in how we as a society. I remember people on the other side of the aisle used to do a great job talking about personal responsibility and that we no longer value the work that people are doing well enough, that we pay them well enough and offer them benefits well enough that they can have their own health care. This is upside down, immoral, and backwards.
Anyone else? Representative Kofal.
Yes, so I guess I just wanted to address a couple of the comments. So one was referring to people, who are older, who don't necessarily, who aren't necessarily as familiar with technology and apps. That is one way of accessing it. I will add that the work requirements don't apply to anyone over the age of 64, for what that's worth. They also don't apply to somebody with Down syndrome. So that would be, that would fall under the definition of medical frailty. So, I think, that there have been some other questions that came up about sort of what if somebody's in the hospital at the very time that they need this the most. Again, that would be a case where somebody would get an exemption for medical frailty, and that is, under those circumstances, likely to happen a whole lot faster than verification of compliance with work requirements, but they would be exempt. So I think a lot of those, I think that the federal law was written with an eye to those kinds of cases. If you have a child under 13, you're exempt. There are a lot of bases for exemption, and the work requirement is, I think, modest and very loosely defined.
Apparently our amendment has arrived. Thank you. Ms. Brandt. I'll give everybody a moment to review it. Everyone has a copy? Everybody all set? Representative McLean.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in response to some of the comments, I understand that many folks have concerns, about potential stigma around work requirements, efficacy of work requirements, things of this nature, and those philosophical differences were discussed when the bill originally came to us. But the reality is that the federal legislation ties our Medicaid dollars to the passage of work requirements, and so if we don't pass this, then it collapses, it goes away, it becomes unfunded, and our ability to offer it as a program to people goes away. With respect to the exemptions in the federal law are broad, and the federal law does emphasize self-attestation, so you can't really get away from it, because it really does emphasize it. So while I understand that some folks on the committee, just philosophically say, yeah, this is not really the way I would like to go, I just want you, when you take the vote, to understand that it is the fate of the program itself. If you vote no on this, then that means we are out of compliance and we will not get the federal money, because that is as a condition. So there's a lot at stake, and I understand the philosophical differences, but I do hope that you take that into consideration when you vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you for taking my question. I guess this is maybe a question for the sponsor of the amendment as well. I am curious to know if there's been a definition of community engagement as well in the title. Is that just a title that is being given to the community engagement and work requirements? That's my first, what the definition, if that has
yes,
any other.
So community engagement is defined in the federal law. So if you look at, this specifically references the community work requirements mean the Medicaid community engagement and work requirements established under Section 7.1. So I'm looking at lines 10 and 11.
Okay.
So it's defined in federal statute and code.
Great, thank you. And one other follow-up.
Sure, follow-up.
Yeah, I guess this is more of just a comment, if I may, and I appreciate being here. I am concerned about implications to when you were referencing third-party verification. Does this have any impact on those who are self-employed? How would they potentially access a third-party verification?
So in that case, they would need to provide documentation if they're self-employed. So the department, in order to reduce the burdens associated with the application process and to speed things along, they use ex parte verification, which means that if they have access to employment records and payroll records directly, they will use that. In the case of a person who's self-employed, they would need to provide that. In the case of somebody who is in a job training program, I presume that they would need to get a letter or some kind of a notice that verifies that they're participating in a job training program. So there are a number of different ways you can fulfill it. So the ex parte verification is, I think, done to the extent possible, but there are a number of scenarios where ex parte would not be possible, and self-employment would presumably be one of those.
Okay, now Representative Lane.
Thank you, and thanks for letting me ask a question. I was in legal services for 10 years, and most of my clients who needed Medicaid or these services, many of them were taking care of someone else in their family that was disabled. And because there weren't enough other services to continually take care of that person. Does that person qualify for Medicaid? They could not have worked because they wouldn't have been able to provide the 24-hour care that was needed for the child or the parent or whatever.
No.
How does that work?
So under the federal law, someone is exempt if they have a child, I think it's under 13, is 13 or under?
Under 13.
If they have a child under 13, or if they are a caregiver of a disabled adult, they are exempt. They're exempt from the work requirements.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you. And is there an appropriation to ensure that there are procedures in place and supports in place for folks with disabilities for accessibility to ensure that whatever this app is that you're referencing, or social workers who may have to help an individual? I'm concerned that there might be a burdensome requirement here that could disadvantage individuals with disabilities from even applying. So I'm curious to know if we have any thought process on that.
I think that would be a question most likely for Director Lippman. Having said that, the app is not a requirement. It is one way that individuals can submit documentation and otherwise show that they're in compliance. So it's an optional, but it makes things easier. So that was developed by CMS. So that's a federal a federal initiative, and the state of New Hampshire has taken advantage of that. I believe because it actually saves money and streamlines things, but that would presumably be a question for Director Lippman.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to echo what Representative Weber was talking about earlier with folks who are on Medicaid and are elderly. I'm going through this with my father-in-law right now. It's a special kind of hell to do all of the paperwork to go from Medicaid to then adding Medicare and then adding Medicaid. It is already really burdensome to do that much paperwork in the first place. To add another hurdle for my father-in-law who will not be able to work is insane.
Anyone else? Representative Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just a personal comment. I'm conflicted. I'm pleased with what the subcommittee did in the work and the openness and the testimony that we were able to hear. I think it was very explicative, and that's the wrong term, but it was very explanatory in terms of the forces that come to play. Basically, as I indicated at the subcommittee, I'm adamantly opposed to the work requirement. But I'm also adamantly opposed to dumping more people off of Medicaid. So I have a conundrum. In some ways, I want to vote no, just on basic principles that it's wrong. But by the same token, I don't want to take away what we have already. And therefore, I sort of look at it from the standpoint to protect the people that we have already, we'll need to pass this. If I vote to pass this, then I have an increased responsibility to change it going forward. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to face your father-in-law where he has no coverage, regardless of how much you fill out. And I've had family members, and I know that intimately. It is a disaster. But it would be an increasing disaster if we don't have work for the moment. So I think regardless of the outcome, it's the onus then becomes back to me to work hard to make sure the changes that we've discussed here and that we all feel for our family members and society in general, that we do the right thing.
Representative Copeland, you had your hand up, I believe.
I did. So I failed to say this before, and I would be remiss if I neglect to thank the department for the work that they did on this, because there was some very careful review, and I appreciate the sort of catching the reference to federal code and other things here. So yeah, and the other comment I will just make in response to the statements from Representative Schultz, the department is also working on a program that will take some time to roll out, but the dual eligible Medicare, Medicaid eligible patients, to streamline that process and make that process easier, which I think will improve the lives of a lot of Granite Staters.
Representative, did you want to make a formal motion? We didn't have the amendment before, so.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to move Senate Bill 134FN and offer Amendment 3093H.
Okay, and Representative
I'll second that.
Representative McLean seconds. Any other discussion before we go to the vote? Motion is ought to pass on Amendment 3093H. Ask the clerk to call the roll.
Rep. Mazer,
Yes.
Rep. McLean,
Yes.
Rep. Delamus,
Yes.
Rep. Kofalt,
Yes.
Rep. Polzov,
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Rep. DeSimone,
Yes.
Rep. McGrath,
Yes.
Rep. Kesselring,
Yes.
Rep. Weber,
No.
Rep. Lane,
No.
Rep. Woods,
Yes.
Rep. Schultz,
No.
Rep. Tejas,
Yes.
Rep. Lamontagne,
No.
and Rep. Murray.
No.
And
Rep McDonald.
yes.
Vote is 12-5. Motion passes.
Okay. Representative Kofal, do you have another motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to move ought to pass with amendment on Senate Bill 134 FM.
Okay, and Representative McLean?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, when the clerk is ready, I'll ask him to call the roll. Motion is ought to pass as amended on SB 134 FM.
Rep Mazer.
Yes.
Rep McLean.
Yes.
Rep Delamus.
Yes.
Rep Kofalt.
Yes.
Rep Polizov.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Rep De Simone.
Yes.
Rep McGrath.
Yes.
Rep Kesselring.
Yes.
Rep Weber.
No.
Rep Lane.
No.
Rep Woods. Rep Schultz.
No.
Rep Tejas.
No.
Rep LaMontagne.
No.
Rep Murray.
No.
And Rep McDonald.
Yes.
Vote is 11-6. Motion passes.
Representative Kofal, I assume you'll be doing the majority report on that? And Representative Weber, I assume there'll be a minority report.
Yes, if I could meet very briefly in the back corner with the Democrats after this so that we can figure out who, so I can let Representative Mazer know, or you. So we'll.
Also let me know.
Okay, great. That concludes the four bills we had under consideration on the calendar for today. We won't be meeting as a committee again until next year, but I want to thank everybody for their service this past year. Wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and everything in between. And any other business to come before us before we adjourn? Okay, thank you. We stand adjourned.